Hello and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar with Object Matrix and Resilio. My name is Leanne, I'm the head of marketing at Object Matrix, and today we are presenting extending media workflows to the cloud and beyond. We will be sharing how real-life file delivery keeps files moving and teams in sync. We'll be providing a live demo during the webinar, which will show how easy it is to set up, automate and visualize a sync job using Resilio Connect integrated with Object Matrix MatrixStore. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. A recording of this webinar will be available on demand following the event. And if you have any questions during the presentation, please just type them into the Q&A box on your Zoom control panel and we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. So our panel of experts today includes Mark Haberfield, who's our global sales engineer from Object Matrix. And from Resilio, we've got James Moore, customer solutions engineer, Josh Sargent, vice president for partnerships and channel, and Jason Goodman, content and product marketing lead. The agenda for our webinar today will cover an introduction from both Object Matrix and Resilio, the challenges that are addressed with both solutions, by both solutions, sorry. We'll be looking at some use cases and also a live demonstration of the integration between Resilio Connect and MatrixStore. Ending the event with hopefully a jam-packed Q&A session. Without further ado, I'll now pass over to Mark, who will be kicking things off with an intro to Object Matrix.
Thanks, Leanne, and thank you for everyone joining us today. Object Matrix, for those of you who don't know us, we were founded back in 2003 by my three bosses who all came from the storage industry. They all helped build Centera, which is still used today. But back in 2005, Object Matrix had an object store and an API, and we called it a cloud. So it's 15 years, far too early for everybody. So we decided working in the media industry, and we made that our focus. And then that became the drive, and all of our apps came from feature requests from our customers. So it's become a company who are developed tools and all for the media industry, and it's organically grown, multiple customers worldwide and multiple petabytes worth of data.
Thanks. So folks, my name is Jason Goodman. I'm going to talk a little bit about Resilio and then hand it off to Josh. So Resilio, we are an interesting company. We're focused on the enterprise and media companies who place high value on their data. That's really the common theme that many of our customers share. And they need extremely reliable, fast, efficient ways to move data. And also what we really specialize in is how you synchronize that data, not just in basic scenarios, but in more complex scenarios, where you're supporting remote workers and workflows in M&E that have much larger assets. And also are these days stretched out across many locations. And also one thing we should point out here is that we've got a diverse product line, and some of you may know about Resilio Sync, but we're really focused here on Resilio Connect, which is our core enterprise product. And that's what we're going to be talking about. And I think from that, let's just get right into it. Let's talk about some of the challenges. So let's go back to you, Mark.
Thanks very much. Cheers for that. Well, I mean, for challenges for storage, it's driven by our customers. I mean, our customers are often time and resource poor. Managing data is not their job. They want to be editing. They want to be creative. They want to be actually working with the data. They tend not to be that DevOps rich. They want to be able to, handle that stuff off and just easily set up systems and get themselves going. They often work wherever their laptop happens to be, whether that's in an office, on-prem, in the cloud, or wherever they happen to be. So a good combination is always needed. And they always want a future-proof platform as well. It's amazing how many people will buy a lump of storage that sits in the corner after 5 years because it's become obsolete. And then someone's got to think about migration. With us, all of that isn't the case. We provide a well-supported product. Our customers, again, large media workflows, large petabyte deployments, in a lot of customers. They also tend to be integrated with specific media workflows, Avid Interplay or Adobe or DaVinci Resolve. They know they need these particular applications to work well with their system. And that's the kind of thing we help with. They also want access to their data and the metadata, and we always protect those as strongly as each other, because if you lose the metadata, you lose access to the data just as much. They also want seamless security and protection in the background, great auditing, great high levels of access control. And again, something, they just want it to work. They don't want the access to controls to be a blocker to the workers. They want to be able to generally get at their assets when they need them and where they need them easily and quickly.
Yeah, and I mean, this dovetails with storage. You've got larger and larger data sets, unstructured data mainly. And for many years in media and entertainment space, you've got people on location acquiring footage, acquiring content. It could be an editor, it could be an artist, a contributor, a partner company that's getting footage to you. You could be on site at an event. And as these file sizes increase, now we're talking about 8K and even potentially 16K. It's not just about ingesting the file and getting it up into your workflow. It's about being able to iterate, edit, and create on-site, on location, and get those changes synced, not just to one other place, but in some situations, like with remote work, to many other places. So how do you do that? And then you're dealing with just a diversity of network situations out there. I mean, from, free Wi-Fi to a paid Wi-Fi to, theoretically 5G helps us on the cell side, but there's still challenges with that. And then home networks. What happens if the network hiccups? How do you deal with that? There's all sorts of challenges. For many years, we've known about latency on networks, and moving larger assets over WANs is no easy task. But also when you think about synchronizing, it's a slightly different problem than simply a file transfer. And at the end of the day, when you think about ingest and you think about synchronizing across workflows and you think about distribution, there's a real critical need to make sure that assets are delivered in a predictable time frame. And workflows across the board struggle with that, and it's really critical. And then if something does go wrong, how do you ascertain and diagnose what's happening? So at the end of the day, it's like, how do you meet these deadlines, both in terms of technical deadlines for delivery and edits and so forth, but then how does that translate to what the business is doing? So it's critical to do those. And then when it comes to understanding, file movement, data movement, the cost should be predictable. But unfortunately, when you bring in the cloud, you bring in some of these other tool sets, it gets expensive quick. And a lot of times it's not known out of the gate what really those costs are going to be. So we find that, customers are struggling with that, and they might not need to have to. So Mark, let's go into some of the core product capabilities of MatrixStore.
Sure, thanks very much. Yeah, so Object Matrix is the company, MatrixStore is the product. And what is MatrixStore? Well, it's an S3 compatible object store. We keep the objects with the data and the metadata next to each other, but we do some things a little bit differently. We don't break the assets up. We don't do erasure coding. We keep the objects whole. And that means your time to first byte is generally quicker than the other object stores that use erasure coding. You haven't got to reconstruct the asset to get to the first bytes. Also helps you with other workflows and lots of our improvements along those lines. We've got full metadata and business rule support, so you decide how the data is looked after. And I'll show you that when we get onto the demonstration. We can work as an S3 endpoint, or we can work in many file-based workflows as well. If you're next to the actual storage itself, we have the file-based access. And again, that adds extra workflows, extra integrations, and extra benefits to the end user. Data security and check-in of the data is a core of the product. So every time you read or write to MatrixStore, we do an MD5 checksum, making sure that data is bit for bit perfect for you. the end user doesn't see any of that. It's just seamless to them. But in the background, we're making sure the data is perfect. You can also choose to have built-in disaster recovery or business continuity. You can choose to have two copies plus an offsite copy. You can have various setups that allow all those things. It's also got built-in smarts as well. And smarts is quite an interesting thing because it allows you to get more from your data. Being media focused, we understand what media metadata looks like. Things like IMF, AS11, anything that's passed through an Adobe and has some XMP metadata, the storage itself will extract that metadata and make it visible to the end users, not to mention just general camera metadata and image information. And all these accesses, they're completely cross-compatible. So if you put it into MatrixStore using our S3 endpoint, you can see that data using our Samba interface. We've got a file system product called MatrixStore File System, MXFS. And if you're using that and you put data in with that, you can see it with our Vision application, which I'll show you shortly. All of that means it's future-proof. You've always got access to the data. It can grow, the systems can grow with you in capacity. If your workflows change, you've just got to pick a slightly different tool or discuss with us, and we'll help you work out the best tools for you. And that kind of leads me into the idea that you've also got three versions of it. We do an on-prem, a hybrid, and a MatrixStore Cloud. So on-prem is exactly that. We are a software company. We've developed the MatrixStore software, but it sits on hardware. And to save that back and forth between the hardware vendor and the software vendor, we can sell the whole package, the on-prem package. That means you can put it in your facility, your data center, your colo, whatever you want to do. And you've got fast, direct access to the data. We've also got the option for the cloud as well, MatrixStore Cloud. We deployed it in the UK first, and we've more recently started pushing it out in South Africa. But we've got customers in the Nordics, in Europe, and in America, all using MatrixStore Cloud, which is currently based in the UK. We will be pushing it out to other locations soon, but at the moment, that's where we started. The difference between our cloud and other clouds, though, is that you're very predictable cost. You know you're paying a certain amount per terabyte for the data and metadata to be stored safely in MatrixStore Cloud. We don't charge egress fees, so you've got access to that data and you can read it back as many times as you like and as quickly as you like. And then lastly, hybrid. Hybrid is exactly that. Some on-prem, some cloud, MatrixStore Cloud, and some public cloud. If you want to bring in a third copy in a deep cloud storage, we can help you facilitate that. Equally, it's become quite useful for our news organizations. They've got bureaus all over the place. They need a small local system because the comms between some countries are a bit worse than other countries. That can all sync back to a central system in their home base. And then in turn, that can go off to a cloud as well. So fitting it into many, many workflows. Lastly, just how do we do it? You know, we'll provide the storage. You tell us what the problem is, and we'll try and help you solve it. We've got lots of customers, and there's no two solutions that are really the same. We've got customers who are purely using us with our Vision application, which gives them a full view of the assets, previews, metadata controllers, etc. Got other customers who purely use us with our file system interfaces, Samba, MXFS. I've got some customers who've put a MAM on top of it, or some other services, transcoders, etc. And it all just shows you the flexibility you can have with MatrixStore. We've also got the Resilio Connect added into this diagram to give us that sync as well. And I think Resilio, as a great partner, does help us enhance MatrixStore, syncing to and from the cloud or between your on-prem and cloud, or even just your end users and centralized storage. So all builds into a flexible, protected asset system with lots of bespoke solutions available. I think I should have told you pretty much everything about MatrixStore now, so I will hand over and let you tell us about Resilio.
All right. Thank you, Mark. So Resilio Connect is, I think, a great solution to go along with such a great storage platform that you have in Object Matrix, that's or MatrixStore, which is providing tons of value for customers who need to store their data in the media and entertainment industry. You're adding additional value there. And the question then becomes, okay, we've got this great storage platform that we can do all sorts of things with, protect our data, store it inexpensively and reliably, et cetera. Now, how do I get this data, these files, into the hands of my users so that they can work their magic, my artists, my editors, et cetera? And Resilio Connect, I think, pairs really well with MatrixStore for this reason. And so in a nutshell, what Resilio Connect is a software solution that's just focused on doing one thing really, really well, and that's file and folder synchronization. That's all we do. We just try to provide a lot of sort of trimmings and trappings around it to make it super simple, reliable, and of course, fast. And so we'll take you through it, but and James is going to show you a little bit of the solution in a minute. But in a nutshell, Resilio Connect is really made up of two components. There's a management console, which is sort of the central web interface where administrators can come and sort of configure everything about Resilio. Which data you want to sync to which devices. And how fast you want it to go, and all sorts of options that you can tweak. I won't get into all the details here, but if you're interested in more detail about this, you're welcome to schedule a call with us. But all kinds of ways you can sort of tweak these synchronization jobs or transfer jobs with Resilio Connect, and it's all done with this one central pane of glass, this simple modern web GUI. It's not just where you configure things, but it's also where you come to monitor the status of everything. So after you've sort of created all these synchronization jobs and you've got your data flowing and syncing, you want to know what's going on with it. What's the status? How fast is it going, right? What kind of resources is it using on your servers and on your end user laptops and desktops? And how far along are these devices in the synchronization process, and which files have synced, and which ones haven't synced yet, which ones are syncing right now this second. And so you can see all sorts of detail in this management console. So it's kind of like your one place to go to control and monitor everything about your data flow in your environment, and whether you're syncing between server to server, data center to cloud, or out to end user devices or between end user devices. We sync data wherever you need it to go. And you can see it all here. But the management console is sort of the central command and control center where your admins are going to come and configure everything and monitor everything. And Mark, if you go to the next slide, we'll talk about the second piece of the solution, which is the agent component. Okay, and the agents are the devices that are actually doing all the synchronizing of data. The management console doesn't actually sync any data by default. You can make it an agent too, but it's really the agents that are doing all the work of synchronizing data. And so you're installing a little software component on, say, all your end user laptops, your desktops, workstations, maybe a NAS device. A lot of our media and entertainment customers will, because they're syncing such large amounts of data, they might deploy a small NAS device, a True NAS or a Synology or something like that, out to somebody's home if they're an editor working from home or on site, on location, whatever. But one of the core benefits of Resilio is that we're multi-platform. We can sync your data anywhere between Mac and Windows and Linux and whatever you need. And also object storage. And we can do that fluidly. There's nothing special you need to do to sync data between different platforms. It's just a matter of putting these agents in the same job so that they can sync data with each other. And you can have one big job that maybe is syncing tons of data, but more than likely you'll have several jobs focused on slightly different data sets, maybe project by project. So you get some editors, some users that need to sync project A data, and others that are involved in project B, and others in project C. And they don't all necessarily need to be syncing all of that data, just the projects that they're working on. And so the agents are syncing directly with each other. This is not syncing through some central point. It's not syncing through any Resilio servers or the Resilio cloud or anything like that. We're syncing data directly between all of your agents in a peer-to-peer fashion. This is what sort of separates us from everybody else. So we can sync the data where all of the peers, all of the agents are participating in serving each other and getting data from each other. So that makes for an extremely rapid way to distribute data or ingest data or synchronize data to lots and lots of devices and keep them in sync, or distribute copies of, say raw assets maybe. And they're syncing directly with each other, so it's very fast, very predictable, and the agents are sort of always evaluating the fastest way to get their data. It doesn't just help speed; it also helps availability. You'll have devices sort of coming up and down, networks going up and down, and what you want is for your devices to always have access to their data no matter what, right? You don't want a single point of failure. If an agent can figure out how to go get its data from some other agent, some other peer, it'll do that. No interaction from administrators or users. It just works. The benefits of this Resilio architecture, one is simplicity, right? You're not in the business of syncing data, right? Your users aren't, their primary job function is not configuring jobs to sync data, and it's not, figuring out how to transfer a file to a colleague and keep them in sync. We want this to be simple. And so you'll see in a few minutes how simple the end user interface is, and there's really nothing to it. And it's a workflow that your end users are already used to. It's files and folders showing up in their file system. There's nothing really to learn. But you got to have clear visibility in terms of what's going on. There's some other sync tools out there that maybe can sync data, but you're not sure of the status. How long is it going to be until the sync is done? How far along are we? What's the ETA? We put a lot of emphasis on this management console to give you lots of instrumentation, lots of insight at multiple levels to see what's going on, and that way when your users can expect to have this data in their hands and ready to go. And of course, speed is super important to us. It's not just about raw throughput. We can move data really fast, 10 gigabits per second plus around the globe, and faster by scaling out. And we can scale to extremely huge data sets. So again, it's a great pair for MatrixStore, which is typically dealing with very large data sets. Hundreds of millions of files, multi-terabyte sized files. We can sync really unlimited file sizes, and do it really reliably. And like Mark mentioned, how the storage is always in the background, checking the data to make sure it's not corrupt. We're also doing that in flight. So you're sort of getting the belt and suspenders approach here. So as you're syncing data, we're making sure it's not corrupt in flight as well. And then, necessarily when you're syncing between locations or out to end users at home or out in the field, you're dealing with latency. And we have our own network protocol that we designed, and it's called ZGT, or zero gravity transport. And this is designed to maximize throughput regardless of latency. So really, regardless of latency, packet loss, flappy connections, our UDP-based protocol here handles all those situations extremely well, and you can sync data as fast as your connection will allow. So that's the product. And so the question is, okay, so if I have say MatrixStore in my environment, I deploy Resilio, what am I getting? And really, it's a few things, and we'll talk about some use cases in a second. But the ability to collaborate on your data, not have to have all your end users all coming back to some central point necessarily, but to enable true, fast workflow speed collaboration on any file, anytime, anywhere. We keep the data synchronized where you need it, whenever you need it. And so accessibility, regardless of location, regardless of how many users it is, et cetera, but in a way that doesn't require your end users to learn some new tool, right? This is very transparent to users. Again, nothing for them to learn in the background. And for the business, this all matters, right? The speed matters, simplicity matters. All this boils down to productivity, really, for your end users. And you want making sure that your data gets where it needs to go, so that your workflows aren't held up because you're waiting on some file transfer. Mark?
Yeah, and that comes to the, the three main points throughout this webinar, the three main themes, hybrid, work from anywhere, predictable cost, predictable delivery, predictable everything, and then just simple interfaces. And that's kind of where the goal is with this system. So when it comes to MatrixStore and with Resilio, I think we like to think there's benefits for all stakeholders. The end user, integrated, non-disruptive, easy to use, easy to find, intuitive, and simple to use. For your CEO and your CFO, predictability, costs, clear return on investments, clear cost of ownership, clear value for the assets, and growing the engagement, ultimately the top line of the growth. And then lastly, pleasing the CTO. I often say the CTO is the hardest person to please, but future-proof, flexible deployments, fully secure, scalable, and consolidated, minimal downtime, very, very happy end users normally means a happy CTO. We did have a few use cases just to rattle through quickly, and I'd like to think we're all going to chime in at various points through this one. But yeah, use cases for Resilio Connect, remote work and collaboration, bidirectional sync, distribution, hybrid cloud. For me, the distribution and the remote ingest, the one-to-many and the many-to-one is where the real benefit comes from Resilio Connect syncing tools. It's the one piece of the puzzle I think MatrixStore has been missing for a little while, but Resilio brings that to us quite nicely.
Yeah. So the remote ingest is popular with, companies where you've got users, say out in the field, maybe on location. They're maybe doing recordings, taking photos, whatever, audio production. They're creating data that needs to be ingested and centralized on the MatrixStore environment. And so the question is, how do you quickly and reliably ingest that data and get it done quickly? And so Resilio can certainly be used for that. Distribution is sort of the opposite, right? You've got maybe you've done a transcode, or you've got some asset that needs to be distributed to a team, and you need to do it as quickly as possible. It's the worst to try to, if you've got 20 people on a team and they all need a copy, you don't want to send the same file 20 times to 20 different people. You want to sort of use our peer-to-peer architecture to swarm that out and let them also serve each other and get it done in a fraction of the time. So that's distribution and remote ingest. But of course, real-time synchronization is also something that's very popular among Resilio customers, where they need to users need to constantly keep files in sync. So as changes are made, they're synced everywhere. And it can be a bidirectional sync or an omnidirectional sync, I guess, if you have many participants. But disaster recovery, remote work, we talked about those. Tons of different use cases, because Resilio is real focused on just being a real simple tool, focused just on syncing files and folders. But in the media and entertainment use case, go ahead, Mark. In the media and entertainment world, we're talking a lot about remote work, right? You've got these people working from home or out in the field, and how do you get access to the data, or give them access to the data? And that's by installing Resilio agents both on the servers that are in the data center or up in the cloud, and also agents on the end user machines, and sort of letting them all sync together. And this is sort of I would say the dominant use case for Resilio with media and entertainment companies, especially, it sort of blew up during the last COVID years, right? The last few years, where everybody had to start working from home, but it also works great in the office. Bidirectional synchronization, I've mentioned this a few times, and it's not just between two servers, right, or two storage platforms and two different data centers. It's really any number of devices. You can have thousands of devices doing bidirectional synchronization, and it's really something when you can do real-time synchronization and not have some single point of failure. Not just a single point of failure, but also no bottleneck, right? You're not dependent on the connection speed of that one central office. And then, hybrid cloud, we realize, hey, not everybody's ready for the cloud. People don't necessarily want other data only in the cloud, or if they are going to the cloud, it's sort of a long-term project. You need to sync data between your on-prem NAS, your on-prem server, or, maybe your on-prem MatrixStore, and you want to sync to MatrixStore Cloud or some other cloud provider as well. Maybe you've got a multi-cloud strategy. Resilio, like I said, because it's sort of platform agnostic, we can sync data anywhere. And then distribution is what Mark mentioned again, is when you need to sort of get the same data out to many devices, and maybe you're not doing real-time synchronization for that data, right? Maybe it's just like a raw asset, right? Like where people aren't going to edit the raw, so it's not going to change. You don't need to do real-time synchronization constantly. You just want to sort of push it out really fast and get it to everybody. And that's what a distribution job type does. I've mentioned a few different job types. I don't want to confuse people. You can have all these different job types doing different things on different data sets, in any sort of mix and match of these different things you can do with Resilio.
I think that'll become clear in the demo. And if I stop sharing now, I'm going to hand over to Jason to do exactly that demo, please.
To James.
James.
All good.
Yes.
All right, we'll let that get shared out here. All right, welcome to the Resilio Connect management console. This is kind of the single control plane or single pane of glass for your data that might be under management with Resilio Connect for syncing. So let's kind of go over a little bit of just how difficult or not difficult it is to get integrated with Object Matrix and Resilio Connect. The first thing we kind of need to do is get connected up to the MatrixStore. So we go to our cloud storage, and you see we had this S3 compatible. We can support different types of S3, and Object Matrix will host up, an S3 compatible type store for us. You'll just give it a name, and then you'll plug in your endpoint credentials and your access ID keys, and then you just kind of point it to the bucket that you want it to sync. Once we have that done, we'll go over to jobs. So you can kind of think of jobs as a workflow. So if you had, different types of data or different buckets that you need to get synced up, you can have, really kind of unlimited jobs here. So there's no limit to the amount of ways you can split it up and get that synchronization going. But we have a test user back here that we're going to add to the job. And you can see our Resilio Connect agent doesn't have any folders. So let's see what it takes to kind of, get a new user onboarded or get integrated into this job. So we can see my James Moore, which is me, if we're going to get my agent added into this workflow. And then you see these, we have a couple of tabs here. So if you had someone that you wanted to get the data and not be able to, sync it back to the main store for whatever reason, you could make them read only. We do have the option for stub files or metadata. So if you have terabytes and terabytes, but only a 200 gig hard drive, you don't want to fill that up. So we can, sync stub files. That way it can download on demand only the data they need. And then when they're done with it, they can free it back up off their computer. Well, for me, we're going to focus on this path right here, and we'll browse to the C drive. And for our example, we have this webinar test. So we're going to select that folder. Let's say this folder didn't exist on that person's computer that you're onboarding. We can click create folder, give it a random folder name that, makes sense to them. And once you hit select and save, it will create that folder on the destination and start seeding that data into that folder without any end user intervention. So we'll go ahead and pick that and commit it. All right, we'll go look at the job. We can see that's in progress. We can see that my agent on my desktop is syncing. You can see it's already starting to pull down the folders. We have a status of 8%. So if, a job is stuck or you want to see, how long is it going to take, we can see currently we're at 27% as it's ticking up. We can get an overall feeling of how much we're pulling down, what we're sending back up, what path that we're syncing, and exactly how much storage is this going to take? Because I'm seeding the whole file. I'm not doing the stubs. I'm seeding all the data. We can look about how much, data that will be on my local machine. We can see there's one file left in queue. So if you have a long running job and the person's worried about, how much more needs to come down, we can see what the download queue looks like. A little more in our Resilio Connect agent for on the end user side is we have this history tab. So you can see, on your machine, what I've downloaded, what I've uploaded, what's been changed or altered. If that's ever a need. And lastly, we'll come look at this options tab. Sometimes bandwidth can be, very limited. Maybe at home, you have a bunch of people using a network and you don't want to overwhelm, your Zoom call or, multiple workers. They can come in here and set download and upload policies where, we won't consume 100% of that bandwidth and overwhelm that endpoint's connection. All right, let's go back to the management console. We can see that my transfer is 100%. I got all my files. And now that person's ready to rock and roll, start working, in that distributed job. And I hope you see that it's super simple, exactly not hard at all to get someone onboarded and into the Resilio console with Object Matrix. Mark, you saw how easy that was. You want to show us what the end user workflow might look like on your side?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. If you could stop sharing for me, I'll share my screen again. And hopefully you should see my computer that I've got in the office. So I've got a MatrixStore in the office. It's for my lab. It's for me to do all my testing and checking things out. But it gives me a good way to present to you guys exactly how easy it is to get going with a MatrixStore. In my case, I've just got a little 2-node system. I'd like to see green lights, but mine's in a bit of a test procedure at the moment, so it's not. But the idea is you've got a cluster, and the cluster can be divided into workspaces, buckets, or we like to call them vaults. I'll give this one a name, just mark Resilio. Spelling helps. And I can choose a few quick, simple policies. Am I going to audit the read writes? Am I going to extract that important metadata? I like metadata. I'm going to make sure that metadata is extracted and available to me. I've got the option to lock the vault, something called compliance, where we can say, hey, look, the data in this vault, it's the raw assets, it's the important stuff. I want to lock it for 90 days. And that's an option to our users, quick and easy. I've got built-in trash cans. I can treat them exactly like the trash can on my desktop, set it for forever. The admin's got to come in and clear it, or I could set it for just a few days, save myself from that accidental deletion. I'll give myself a little chance to get back at it. I've got protection policies, keep 2 copies at all time for business continuity. Hey, drop it down to single because I want to create some space, but maybe turn it into a hybrid vault. I'm going to be pushing these assets off to a different storage. All these sort of settings, as you can see, quick and easy to get going. That's it. Set myself up a bucket. Someone's got to be the administrator. The administrator doesn't need access. And straight away, I can give some users some access. I think I'm going to give my Resilio user a quick bit of access. And I can say super quick, he's an admin and a read write user. And that's it. Set up a vault, giving people access. Away we go. How do I get access to that vault? Well, a few ways. I could be as a user using our S3 endpoint. I could generate some access keys so I can use any of our S3 applications, or I could come in with what we call Vision. Vision is a view of the data in your MatrixStore. When you log in, you see your vaults on the left-hand side. You see your data in the middle, and you see your metadata on the right. Looks familiar? The only difference here is this is all looking at the objects live. This isn't a database. I'm not reading databases back. I'm actually looking at metadata that was extracted, held on the object, and then available to me straight away through the interface. I can do searches, all vaults, current folders, etc. I can add in the ability to add extra metadata, tags, rename, move things around. I can add attachments. I can get links if I have permission. I can even get a public link and give that out to other people to share as well. In this case, though, we don't really need to worry about those linking projects because we've got all of our teams working together. So we've actually tied it up with our cloud version of Resilio, and you'll see that exact same folder of data that we just synced is the webinar test folder. And in there, we've got all our assets. Funnily enough, I'm also syncing them on this particular machine as well. I've got a Resilio agent on here, and in my webinar test folder on the desktop, hey, look, there's all those same assets that I've got available to me. Suddenly, because I've got them all available to me, I've got them available to my edit platform. And I can quickly and easily say, hey, look, my edit platform is here. I can make some quick rough changes. Turns out that was the wrong file. I wanted to add a different file onto the back of my edit. Excuse my poor editing skills. You open up. I can add that file in. I can make a change as quickly as this, and then I can press save. That's going to save. Resilio is going to do its thing. It's going to pick it up, see that a change happened, and send that off. Beauty of that is I can then come back to my laptop here. I'm about 80 miles away from that lab at the moment, just on the other side of the country. And you can see my Resilio Connect on my laptop is also syncing. Once that's done, it's made all the same assets appear on my local machine. And because this just updated just this minute, I can now open this straight away with my local edit application, exactly the same. There we are. The edit I just made is live to me straight away. And that's just as simple as it can be. You use folders, Resilio, MatrixStore to get your assets where they need to be, when they need to be, with all the safety and security behind it. So I can see some questions have come in, and I think we're probably best to push on to the Q&A side of things.
Thank you, Mark, for that great demonstration. And thank you to Jason, Mark, James, and Josh for a great webinar. Really, really informative. And we've had a lot of questions coming in throughout. So we will just start to go through that. So we've had one from Rodrigo. Maybe this is a boring question. Not at all. The system supports MFA ?
So I was going to say from the Resilio side, we do support MFA. We do have, you can go under our settings and enable multi-factor authentication. It's an OTP, scan the QR code, get registered type of system.
Okay, yeah, and from our point of view, Vision has integration with Okta, and very, very soon, talking probably just into the new year, we should have the same with Azure AD single sign-on as well, so multi-factor auth through the third-party tools.
Thank you both. Another question here, how to migrate from Sync to Connect as a question.
There's two products here I think we're talking about, Resilio Connect and Resilio Sync. Maybe the first step might be for someone to explain to me what the difference is.
Yeah, there's quite a few differences actually. They're really you know, at their very core, they are trying to do the same thing, which is syncing data. But a lot of the functionality we talked about today is only available in Resilio Connect. It's the much more advanced tool, centralized management, whereas Resilio Sync is sort of configured on each individual user's device, which you do not want to do if you've got lots of users. And Sync has a few things that prevent it from working really in this object matrix workflow, which is that it doesn't support object storage. Firstly, only Connect does. You know, Connect has all the latest and greatest features, and it comes with support, and you know, newer versions of our WAN acceleration protocol can go much faster. And I mean, there's a bunch of differences, but one final difference that's key to what we talked about today is we talked a lot about ingest and distribution jobs, which are not built into Sync. If you want to do like an ingest or a distribution type job with Sync, it would, I imagine it's possible, but it would require quite a bit of maybe custom scripting on your end or something like that, where it's all sort of built in, these different job types. With Connect, scale is much bigger. We can handle much larger data sets. I think with Sync, you'll find that it probably tops out around, I don't know, a million files or so. But Connect can scale to much larger data sets. So if you're a Sync user today and you're interested in Connect, you should get in touch with us, and we're happy to take you through a more detailed look at Connect. And then our engineers can help you with technically switching over.
Great, thank you, Josh. Another question then. So what happens when users are collaborating on the same file with syncing?
Sure. On the Resilio side, we don't really have any file locking or anything like that, but we do support, we always do last write wins. Sorry, I got tongue tied there. So the last person to save the file or commit the file will overwrite all the other files. So that's something to keep in mind when you might have multiple people working on, one file simultaneously.
Yeah, I think I've just been looking actually at our files and doing these tests for this one. And I think what's actually happening is the last file gets chucked into the trash can, and then you write the last file to us. So actually, we've got a bit of a trash can history built into it. So yes, last file wins, but the file before it will be in the trash can. So you're probably protected from that side of things in our world, so to say.
We also do on the local machine, we have what we call the archive folder as well. So if something does happen where multiple users step on each other, we do kind of a versioning in that archive folder. So you might have like text file .1, text file .2, if there's any kind of iteration there.
And is there a minimum number of users that can use Connect?
Sorry, I'm on mute. No minimum number of users. We have implementations ranging from very small shops where it's just one or two people, really one person syncing multiple devices. They just need the feature set, all the way up to 80,000 devices syncing data. So we can scale from very small to very large.
And then Josh, one other thing, I think Ziosk is a company that's distributing out to like 150,000 endpoints.
Yeah.
To restaurants. And then we've also got a couple of huge restaurant services company, one of which going, I think, to 3,500 endpoints concurrently.
Thank you. And Mark, one for you actually. So why MatrixStore Cloud over other clouds?
Well, it's a question we get quite regularly these days. And from my point of view, you've got two main reasons. The one is no egress charges. I can't believe a lot of these clouds charge you to get your data back. You own the data. Why should you have to pay to get it back? And my second reason is that we're experts in the media industry. You've got a support problem, you can ring up our support team and they know what codecs you've got, what your media workflow is, and we'll be able to help you specifically for the media industry. It's not to say we haven't crossed over into other verticals. We have banks, we have government institutions, we have record labels out there, but we typically stick with those media workflows, looking after their video and stills assets.
Great, thank you. I think we've got time for one more question. So for the end user, does the placeholder function still exist?
Yes. So on the Resilio side, when you select that transparent selective sync or selective sync checkbox I talked about in the management console, that puts the stub file or just kind of the metadata pointer record on the end user's computer. That way you're not filling it up with terabytes of data they might not need. So, and then once that's downloaded, you can always free that back up to a stub file if you need to.
Leanne, do we have time for one more question?
Yes.
Somebody asked, how easy is it to scale? I presume that has to do with scale agents, scale capacity, scale performance.
So how easy is it to scale? It's really as easy as adding another machine. There's not too much to it. So you saw how easy it was to kind of go through the workflow and, start adding, add a new machine to a job or, add something to a workflow. That's about as difficult as it gets to, start scaling out. If you start scaling out, files, if you get more files and, start adding that up, just maybe add a little more horsepower. There's nothing really to our software that makes it difficult to start growing your data or syncing your data.
Yeah, and I was going to say the same is true for MatrixStore as well. If it's MatrixStore Cloud, don't worry about scale. We'll make sure everything's working in the background. But if you have picked a MatrixStore on-prem, I mean, we've got customers, lots of customers who are 10, 12 years. Now their hardware has expired. So what they've done is they've added in new nodes seamlessly, no downtime, increase it with the latest hardware, the latest generations. The data grows into that space. And then the old stuff, they just hit the decommission button, type in a password, and that node will seamlessly move the data to other nodes within the cluster in the MatrixStore and seamlessly turn itself off. So, you know, we've had BT in the UK for their video on demand system. They just kept adding nodes. They got up to 54 nodes at one point, and then they started decommissioning their very oldest. And that was great because they didn't see any downtime. It was a seamless process for them. And anybody who's ever migrated other platforms will know it's quite often not that in the world.
Hey, just real quickly, the previous question about the stub files and that feature, and James talked about it and he even showed it in his demo, but I just want to come back to it just because it dovetails with the prior question, which was differences between sync and connect, and this is actually an important one. So if you're a sync user and you're used to that sort of stub file connection, we call it selective sync. In Connect, yes, it's still there, but it's actually way better. We call it transparent selective sync in Connect, and so this makes it much more fluid for the end user. They don't have to right click on files and sort of manually tell it to sync. They just they just double click the file to open it or open it with one of their tools, and it just transparently syncs in the background. So that's a great example of something that's way better in Connect than what you have in Sync.
Thank you very much, guys. Okay, so I think it looks like we've covered all of our questions. So thank you, everybody. We really appreciate you being here. And thanks again for joining us today, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.